Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Lou Lamoriello and the Toronto Maple Leafs announcing that today he would not be returning as Maple Leafs GM for the foreseeable future. Now they announced yesterday that Lou will not be returning for the 18-19 season and he'll be transitioning into a senior advisor for the Maple Leafs, whatever that means. Now the plan, the so-called Shanna plan, was always for him to be the general manager for 3 years and then continue to be that senior advisor role for 4 years afterwards, and that's exactly what's happened. He's served 3 full years as the Maple Leafs GM, and of course retiring this season was the plan that was set to be placed, and now Kyle Dubas is set to be the next guy following Lou Lamoriello. And of course Lamoriello was put in as Leafs GM to start the rebuild and finish it in 3 years time, and he did exactly that. First, he started trading Phaneuf and Reimer, 2 big guys that needed to be traded out. They were getting older, and 2 guys that weren't going to fit that role of the next Maple Leafs team. Then he extended Kadri and Riley for great extensions, and both of them are looking pretty good. At least Kadri's looking really good, Riley's looking good, but Kadri's looking like a great contract still at 4.5. Both of those extensions looking very, very good. He also traded for Anderson and extended him to having a great deal there, but Anderson being one of the staples of the team and being, well, probably much the only reason they went to 7 games versus Boston, Anderson being a key part of the team that's got to the playoffs 2 straight years in a row, and a great trade there for Lamoriello, as Anderson is definitely the goaltender that the Maple Leafs needed. Then mid-season, a couple of years ago, he got McElhinney. Then later that season, he basically saved their season, getting a game-winning save against Sidney Crosby against the Pittsburgh Penguins in their last game, or the second to last game I think it was, against Pittsburgh Penguins, and that was a huge save, and McElhinney would be one of the main reasons Toronto Maple Leafs made the playoffs that season for the first time in a long time. And of course the Maple Leafs made the playoffs in that season, having a great record, and were able to squeak just barely in the playoffs with the Lightning just behind them, but made the playoffs since the first time in 2013 last season, and had a great season overall for the team. The expectations were below what they expected, and of course Maple Leafs made the playoffs, which blew everybody's minds at the time. And of course, they took the President's Trophy winning Washington Capitals to 6 games, and they showed signs of being fair competitive with Washington, not giving in. A lot of people joked Washington in a 3, but the Leafs showed very, very good competitive game and played very well against the Washington Capitals. But he dealt with the expansion draft pretty well, only having to get up Leipzig to the Golden Knights. Of course, he was traded to Vancouver, played a lot better in Vancouver, but is basically a third liner at this point, best for the Vancouver Canucks. And I think that him only having to give up Leipzig compared to what other teams like Florida gave up, I think he dealt with it pretty nicely there. In that same offseason, he assigned Marleau and Hainsey, 2 guys that worked very well for the Toronto Maple Leafs this season and in the playoffs, and those 2 guys were very good signings. I mean, he had traded for Volcanic in the trade deadline, and this season they had the most points, I think, in the franchise history, and even though that says something about Toronto, it was still a very good season for them, having the playoffs 2 years in a row for it was basically a long time before Toronto had that kind of season, I think since like 2004, something like that. But they haven't had back-to-back playoffs in a long time, and Lou brought them there. And I don't think that Lou could have had a better 3 years as GM. He made a lot of moves. I mean, the Sites extension is probably the worst move that he made, but even then, it's not a terrible move. It might be a little bit of a negative one, but it wasn't a terrible move, and GMs are going to make mistakes, as always, but to have that Sites extension as his worst move, I think is pretty good. He's had as good as a Leafs GM career, that 3-year career there, as good as any other GM could hope for. I mean, Lou brought them back from the brink, back to one of the best teams in the NHL, 2 playoffs in a row, brought the Matthews, brought them that young core, developed those guys, and bring the core that is now there back to Toronto, and it's worked out very well for them, basically as good as they could have hoped. And Lou's definitely had a significant effect on the Toronto Maple Leafs. His moves have been fantastic, and they desperately needed a GM who has had experience, who has made the right moves, and they desperately needed the 2 playoffs in a row. The Shannon plan has worked. The 3-year cycle between the rebuild to success has worked immensely. They went through a massive overhaul in only 3 years, and they were a rebuild. They were a lottery team that had the first overall pick to a team that was in the top 5 of the standings, and almost beating the Boston Bruins in 7 games. And I really couldn't be any more happy for Lou and what he's done for Toronto. He's done a fantastic job, and he's definitely deserved to be credit because he's done fantastic, and he pretty much has done the best that he could, and you can obviously see it. He's transformed this team, and it's working very well. And of course, he's had the blueprint, and the blueprint is going to be structured, and already is structured somewhat, and is going to continue to play well and perform throughout the next few years. And Toronto will be a playoff team throughout the next few years, and that's mostly because of Lamoriello. Heck, this team went from Bozak being the first line center just a few years ago to having the team built around that, and having the team now is a magnificent transition here. But of course, Kyle Dubas is set to be the next GM. It's pretty much set in stone. That's the Shanna plan, and Kyle Dubas is set to be the next GM. As Kyle, or at least Lamoriello, has kind of been teaching him and grooming him throughout these few years here, and I think that Kyle Dubas is definitely ready. He's one of the youngest guys out there, but I already think he's experienced. I already think he's ready, and I think he'll do very well for Toronto. He could be snatched up by somebody, but I think that's a very unlikely chance. I think that Dubas will be the next guy in line for that GM spot, and I think he'll perform very well there. Lamoriello has already done most of the work. Kyle Dubas just needs to come in. He's going to have to take a tricky situation with the cap space, as Matthews, Marner, and Nylander were going to have to be signed. But again, if he keeps those checked, if he keeps everything going, I think he'll have a good time in Toronto. I think that the success will just keep on going as long as you handle that cap situation well, which is one of the biggest ifs, but I think he has the tools to do that for sure. Overall, Lamoriello had an amazing 3-year stint with Toronto. Again, as good as you could ever hope for, and I don't think he's going to go for anything else. Again, he's pegged to have that senior advisor role for, I think it was like 4 years, something like that. And I think that he's here to stay in the Toronto area, and I think that he's going to stay with Maple Leafs. I think that he's going to fit well in that senior advisor role. But Kyle Dubas, I think, is a good fit for GM, and of course, he's had the time to learn from Lamoriello after the past 3 years. I think that he'll have the experience and the guys around him to do very well. So that's when, guys, like and subscribe and not ring that bell if you haven't. Tell me down below what you thought of Lou Lamoriello in these 3 years with Toronto. What do you think about Kyle Dubas setting in the new GM role, or if they'll hire somebody else for some reason? I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.